I've been doing a survey of the Old Testament, looking at each of the Old Testament books, and presently we are in the book of Ecclesiastes. As we look at the book, first of all, the title. The book gets its name from the Greek version, which has Ecclesiastes or assembly. The Hebrew name is Kohelet, meaning one who addresses an assembly of learning. The text can mean one then who collects wise sayings, or one who addresses an assembly, as we said. Since the word is feminine in Hebrew, it probably denotes an office. The word also is derived from the root kahal in Hebrew, which in the Hiphil means to assemble or cause to assemble. Young concludes, the word thus designates the function of the leader who speaks in the assembly. Hence, the translation preacher is approximately correct. The author. Two basic views of authorship are generally propounded. There are many who make the author anonymous and place him in the post-exilic period. The basis of this position concerns linguistic and philosophical consideration, and those who adhere to it make the author as one who personifies Solomon, sort of like Plato personified in his writing Socrates. While many adhere to this view, there is also good evidence within the book itself that Solomon was its author. The title, for example, in 11:1 would easily fit with Solomon. And when a consideration of chapters 1 and 2 are made, there is no reason for not seeing this as autobiographical. Solomon, that is, writing it as an old man. He looks at wisdom, he looks at wealth, servants, pleasure, building activities, and all of this can clearly be Solomon. Solomonic authorship is also supported by Jewish tradition. Therefore, it is most likely that Solomon is the author who is viewing his own past life, now as an old man, giving many of the observations that he himself found to be vain in some of the pursuits that he had pursued. He then concludes, as a man of experience and wisdom, that the greatest good in life is to fear God and keep his commandments. And in the book, he tries to illustrate how the fear of God works itself out in various areas. The date of the book, the book was probably written then about 10th century BC by Solomon himself in the later years of his life. As to the historical background, while it is felt that Solomon wrote the Song of Songs early in his life, it is believed that Ecclesiastes was written in the later years to a young man or to young men concerning the chief object of life. Scroggie, for example, writes, the three writings which are associated with his name, the Song, the Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes, represent three periods of his life. The first, his early life, the second, his midlife, and the third, his late life. The first reflects his domestic weakness, the second, his ethical wisdom, which, however, he did not always practice, and the third, his final disillusionment and disgust with everything under the sun. Even in Jewish rabbinic thought, it was said that Solomon wrote the first Song of Songs as a young man, Proverbs in middle age, and then finally the book of the Kohelet as an old man, or Ecclesiastes. as to the historical background uh, and purpose, let me move to purpose and talk about the purpose. The primary purpose is to set forth the vanity of pursuing earthly goals and blessings apart from a commitment to the will of God and His commandments. Making such goals as one's occupation in life leads only, in the final analysis, to vanity and emptiness instead of fulfillment and blessing. After trying such things as human wisdom, philosophy, pleasure, wealth, material possessions, etc., he concludes that the real goal of life is to fear God throughout and keep His commandments. Thus, life is vain unless God Himself is the ultimate standard by which the entirety of one's life is measured and interpreted. In terms of its flow of thought or argument, the theme of the book of Ecclesiastes is the vanity of human wisdom and its endeavor. The book of Ecclesiastes, then, is a book in which Solomon views life tachat hashamish, under the sun, or as a natural mind would. He begins by stating his theme in the first 3 verses. It is stated as follows: vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. The Hebrew, heva havalim amar kohelet, heva havalim akol havel. That is, everything is fleeting. Notice he then demonstrates the theme as he considers the passing of one generation after another, sort of like people on a stage putting up a performance, going off, and new actors come on. Shakespeare well applied that in one of his writings. Then we have the various cycles of nature he looks at, as seen in the sun rising and setting, the wind in all of its constant change and activity, the rivers. He then concludes his demonstration of the theme by stating the transitoriness of all things in chapter 1, verses 8 to 11. Following this, the king tries then various areas in order to find lasting satisfaction, and concludes that all his experimentations are vain. He tries human wisdom in chapter 1. When one becomes wise, one has sorrow because he can't solve the riddles of life. Before that, he really didn't know about them, the details. Furthermore, pleasure won't satisfy in chapter 2. Materialism will not satisfy. And wisdom and folly together lead to the same result. That is the final mortality of humankind. Human labor will not satisfy. One must leave often what one toils for one who destroys what one has spent a lifetime doing. So all this proves his theme, all is vanity. Next, Solomon follows his experimentations with observations on the theme. He observes philosophy, first of all, in chapter 3. He looks at fatalism, evolutionism, universalism, agnosticism, and humanism, and he observes at the end that all is vanity and a chasing after the wind. He further sets down the vanity of the inequalities of life in chapter 4, of human religion in 5, and of riches. There is a vanity in the pursuit of riches, since these are unable to ultimately satisfy one's inner heart and desire. And because They are transitory in their existence. The author concludes his observations by viewing the futility of life and its vanity, the reality of coming death, and an uncertain future make life futile and vain, the Kohelet writes. After making these observations, the author then gives various admonitions in view of the theme. This is from chapter 1, verse 1 through chapter 12, verse 7. He gives admonitions. These are almost like proverbial statements concerning honor, levity, cautiousness, what proper wisdom should look like, God's sovereignty, temperance, flattery, and it's how it really will not ultimately mean a lot. The adulterous, human government, human falling, and man's inevitable end. Wisdom, laziness, investing for the future. All of this is found in chapters 7 through 11. The last admonition concerns youth in chapter 11, 1 to 12, 7. As Solomon advises the youth to avoid evil and to remember God in view of the coming of old age. The writer's description of old age is classic. This is in chapter 12. The hands begin to tremble. The legs are weak. They cannot climb a mountain like they used to. One's teeth are lost, and the eyes go bad. Sleeping habits change as one goes to bed early and arises early. The hearing dims. Fears increase. The hair whitens. The elder's strength wanes, as well as his sexual desire as he nears his end. His spinal cord is loosed. His skull is broken. His circulation ceases, and his heart fails to function. The last step is death, as the soul is separated from the body. So he gives this description of old age and warns his young hearers to heed what I have to say before the onslaught of aging. The preacher now comes to the conclusion of his theme. In chapter 12, 8, he concludes, "Vanity of vanities," says the preacher, "all is vanity." Hevel havalim amad kohelet hakol havel. That is, everything is transitory. Everything is fading. Following this proven conclusion, then, the writer speaks concerning his continual activity and gives a little advice concerning the endless task of writing book after book. He encourages people to read what he has written. And he also speaks of the tiresome task of constantly studying everything written. I've often wondered what he would have thought about everything out on the internet. Finally, having viewed life in many areas and from many perspectives, tachat hashamish, under the sun, the writer concludes by giving a summation of man's highest duty and good. He is to fear God and to keep his commandments in preparation for future judgment. He writes, "Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every work into judgment, with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil." And so, having looked at the overview and basically a brief summary of its main themes, we then say a word about the overall outline again. We have the introduction to the theme in chapter 1, looking at how generations come and go, looking at the cycles of nature in the sun, the wind, the rivers, and hence the transitoriness of all things. Furthermore, he looks at the spirit experimentations on the theme in chapters 1 and 2. The vanity of human wisdom is discussed again, the vanity of seeking pleasure in life alone, the vanity of materialism, how both wisdom and folly, wisdom is better than folly, but both end up with the mortality of all humanity, the vanity of human labor, and the conclusion of his experimentation. That's all in 1 and 2. In chapter 3, we have further observations on the theme in the vanity of philosophy, as we've seen, of fatalism, evolution, universalism, agnosticism, humanism, and then the vanity of the inequalities of life, of oppression, of envy, of loneliness, of popularity, the vanity of religion that is not real, the vanity of riches, their inability to satisfy, their transitory existence, and the vanity, furthermore, of the reality of coming death, the vanity even of longevity if one cannot enjoy life in the way God intended, and the futility of an uncertain future for everyone. Having said that, he then talks about, as we've seen, the next part of the outline would be 7:1 to 12:7, the admonitions in view of the theme. And we saw that as concerning honor, levity, cautiousness, proper wisdom, God's sovereignty, temperance, flattery, adultery, human government, human failing and inability, life in view of man's inevitable end, how wisdom is exalted but soured by folly, concerning kings, laziness, feasting, good works, concerning the future, which is unknown, and finally concerning youth, encouraging them, as we've seen, to avoid evil and to remember God and the reality of one's mortality. He illustrates the decrepitude of age, as we saw, with the trembling of the hands, the weakening of the legs, the loosing of the teeth, the darkening of the eyes, the changing of sleeping habits, the dimming of the hearing, the increasing of fears, the whitening of the hair again, the waning of strength, the ceasing of sexual drive, the nearing of the end, the loosing of the spinal cord, the skull being affected, the ceasing of circulation, the failing of the heart, and the separating of the body from the soul. All of that is finalized with the statement, vanity of vanities. So we have the conclusion then of the theme, 12:8 to 14, with vanity of vanities, all is vanity. And then the whole idea of the endless task of reading many books. What he's saying is, read what I've written. It will be the final statement of how to live life wisely. And finally, a summation, as we saw, of the highest good in life, to fear God and to keep his commandments and prepare for future judgment. This is the overall theme of the book of the Kohelet. One of the things I would like to say, it is the most philosophical book in the Bible. And one of the most important things, I think, in understanding the book is that it's not just pessimism. He wants to try to say life should be lived in a wise way and make choices that are wise. And all the way through the book, he's talking about that. the importance of friendship, the importance of applying wisdom in the different areas. So the whole book is not being written to be pessimistic, but showing that life has to be thought out in the way one lives in a wise way. And I've thought about, as a Christian minister, how that all the way through Christ provides the answer to the Kohelet's quest. Christ is the embodiment of the final wisdom of God, we're told in the New Testament. Jesus gives, if one toils for him, one's toil is not in vain. Jesus says, don't seek just riches, but seek the kingdom of God and follow him. And all the way through, there is an answer that Christ gives in the New Testament to every one of the pursuits that Solomon is pursuing. So we need to read the book for wisdom and apply it, but then we also need to see how Christ is the final, can I say, application of all that Solomon is writing about. And one of the things I've been doing is putting out a commentary, a running commentary on the Kohelet, on Ecclesiastes, and trying to work through it section by section. It's a marvelous book, and it helps us to find wisdom. One of the great themes that I love is when he talks about toil, have one handful of rest and one handful of work. And we live in a culture where everybody's working 24/7, and there's no one handful of rest. That's just one example of the wisdom that is found in this amazing book. So I would encourage the reading of it, the meditation of it. When I was in high school, I used to play basketball, and they would have us run track to try to get in shape for the basketball season. I remember one night in track practice, we were running around the track, and it was a mile run. And as we were running around, we were exhausted in the last lap. One of the fellas had decided he would play a joke. Instead of completing all 4 laps, he hid on the other side of the track behind some weeds and behind some bleachers. And then when everybody was coming around for the last lap, he broke out in a run and finished out in front of everyone. The only problem was the coach saw what had happened, and he wasn't happy at all. And he didn't let this person run in the next race. I've often thought about that, how in life we need to avoid the, can I say, the pitfalls of life. To keep in the race, we need to have wisdom to run properly and not try to hide ourselves in some of the things that Solomon pursues that in the end prove to be transitory and fleeting. So what a great book. I would encourage the reading and meditation in it.